My name is Tjeerd Bouma. I'm a scientist at the Royal Netherlands Institute of Sea Research in Rijke. I work on ecosystem restoration, marine ecosystem restoration, and I think that understanding how the ecosystem functions and how natural establishment works is the only way we can effectively restore ecosystems and sustainably use them. And this also applies to ecosystem in artificial systems like wind farms or other ones.
My name is Karen Lidderen. I work as marine ecologist at Waardenburg Ecology, and I specialize in translating the scientific findings into real-world applications. And especially in this interesting time of energy transition, it's really important to start putting things in practice.
My name is Caterina Coral and I am a PhD student at the News on Texel. For the ReViFES project, I look at a natural reef offshore that naturally occur in the North Sea, and we want to investigate the services that they provide.
In the past, we had many natural reefs and they have been lost over the last century. At the moment, we would like to restore them, and many attempts have been done, but often they failed. And this is because we didn't properly study how natural reefs establish and how they function. And then we lose a lot of money. Now we know that natural establishment is often rare and may take a long time because they need a special window of opportunity. And if we understand how that works, then we can create the measures to actively restore them and get them back much faster.
What is really interesting, it's not so much about the animal itself. The animals are really important, but what is especially interesting, the structure that they make. So for example, here you can see how oysters glue together as one big clump, and this stays on the seabed for centuries. Stabilizing the complexity, all these features make them ecosystem engineers, so they really alter their environment. And that is the reason why it's such a nice habitat for other species to start living in.
The most famous example of reefs is given by the tropical coral reef that we all know. But in the North Sea, we do have some example of these ecosystems, of these reefs. Less colorful and less famous perhaps, but nevertheless also important. These reefs are located very remotely sometimes, so to go and sample there and study them, you need a research vessel with a hard-working crew and a set of expensive tools and methods to take the samples you need. And what we do in my project is we want to see what ecosystem services they provide, what is the effect of these reefs, and to do this we compare reef areas with worm reef or shellfish reef or stony reef that are present in the North Sea, and we compare them with area of no reef. So we take a set of samples from one location and the others, and the difference we find in our data makes up for what we then call a reef effect of the services, ecosystem services provided by the reefs. What we noticed in our 4-year research is that one of the obstacles for us was to find a good example of healthy reefs in the North Sea, because unfortunately a lot of them has disappeared in the past centuries. We did find nevertheless some very good examples that are now protected under marine protected area or other legislations. And we were very lucky to obtain the permit to sample one of the best and largest and most well-preserved horse mussel reef in Scotland, discovered so far. Is at the Noordzee in the northeast of Scotland, and we could sample this reef, although it's protected, but some fishing activity, very strictly regulated, is still allowed, so they fish for whelks, and that means fishing gears is still present at the bottom in selected location, and that is also limiting our potential to take samples and navigate throughout the area.
The program North Sea ReViFES aims at creating the knowledge needed for North Sea reef restoration, both for biodiversity goals as well as to support fisheries, but also to be implemented in technological developments like wind farms. And it's a nice program in that it covers a broad range of techniques. It goes all the way from oyster hatcheries techniques so that we can get the larvae needed for the restoration. But it also involves studying existing wind farm designs, how they boost reef technology, and analyzing that and finding innovations. And this is, for example, the PhD thesis from Remmert de Hofstede. He worked on that aspect, and it's very nice that in the North Sea ReViFES we have a broad group of end users, ranging from governmental, NGOs, industries. And by having all these partners on board, you also know for certain that the knowledge that we generate lands where it's needed, and that the knowledge gets into the sea for active restoration. Unfortunately, we have learned that restoring marine ecosystems is extremely difficult. And we've known that now for many systems like seagrass meadows, salt marshes or reefs. And this graph explains how it comes. If we look at the x-axis, we have an environmental stress. It can be high or it can be low. On the y-axis, we see the ecosystem state. It can be a bare soil, or it can be one of these ecosystems like a seagrass meadow, a marsh or a reef. And then you see that there is a range of stress levels where you can have both systems. For the transition from the bare soil to one of these ecosystems to happen, it requires a window of opportunity. And that means that you need a period where you get, and it can be short, where you get this extremely low stress. Well, this may be the normal, but you need this short period with this very low stress. And then the system shifts to this level where you get the ecosystem established, and once it's establishing and it will expand, it can cope with these normal conditions. So most ecosystems will with time recover, but it may take a very long time, like 100 years or more. And in those cases, it's really needed to create a window of opportunity as humans. And we can do that by either lowering the stress or by having active restoration measures that we kickstart the community, and by doing so that the system can get over a critical size threshold to maintain itself.
What we found for our research, one result is that these reefs, they really are hotspots for biodiversity, so they do improve biodiversity, which was expected, of course. But what we noticed is that the food web networks that build within these faunal communities are really more complex within these reefs habitat. And we found this in rocky reefs, or worm reef or shellfish reef, regardless of their origin. And if a system has more complex food webs, that means there are more relationship between species, and therefore if there is a disturbance or an impact that perhaps can take away one of these species and thus one of these connections, there is easily another species ready to replace it because the biodiversity is higher and the food resources are higher. So these ecosystems might be more resilient to stress, for example, or disturbances. Another result we found, we are still working at this, so we have preliminary observation for it, but we did look at the fish communities and how they might be affected by the presence of a reef. And we did see more species, more different species in the reefs, non-commercial but also commercial, like mackerel or cod or other cod-like species, for example. And we even saw one very rare species at the North Head in Scotland. We saw blue skate, which was really exciting, although expected, but it was really exciting to see actually that it was in the surrounding. And finally, we have another results, but might be a little bit less evident, but it's really important because it's very ecologically important. So reefs build up by shellfish, for example, or other filtrating animals. They are very important because the filtration activity performed by shellfish like oysters or mussels that build up these reefs. So by filtering the water, they retain their food. that is contained in these particles that are suspended in the water. And then what they don't need, they make it available again at the seabed. And this becomes food for other species that lives on the seafloor and they may not have access to the water column. And so they kind of couple what's suspended in the water to feed up the species on the sediments. And we sampled several different mussels and oyster reefs in the Wadden Sea to test for this. And we did see that the sediment in the reef and also nearby the reefs, so this is possibly exported, they were richer in food availability for other species. So overall, we did find different effect on different level, like biodiversity or fish, perhaps fishing, and also for the species living on the seafloor and this recycling of nutrients. So it's really interesting.
What we know nowadays is that if waiting for natural reef establishment will take for a long time because they need a window of opportunity to establish, and those are rare. So what we need to do is give them substrates, temporary substrates that form this window of opportunity. Because normally if you start restoring by putting oysters on the seafloor, they get buried and they wash away. But if you give them a temporary structure that is a hard structure on which they can establish, then they can grow, and if the structure degrades over time, then you will get these larger clumps and from which pieces break off, and then you get a whole reef. And ideally, if we make something like that, these degradable structures, we also want to have height, because originally reefs also had height difference and they were complex in structure. And it may take a long time before you get a natural reef back that has all this complexity. So I think we should create windows of opportunities by offering complex structures that are high enough so that other organisms can already sit in between, the oysters can establish, and while it degrades we get this larger, complex, beautiful reef back.
Yeah, we learned that it's possible to aid reefs in areas where there's no bottom disturbance. Of course, we want to implement this knowledge in areas, preferably in conservation areas, but since there is not many areas without bottom disturbance, we can also start in wind farms. And what is really important to realize is that we are just starting, so it's important to keep doing, to keep learning, to keep sharing the knowledge so that we know in time how we can restore these reefs.
I think we learned that reefs are really valuable ecosystems, and if we're gonna wait for them to recover in a natural way, it may take forever. So if we want to get these systems back, we need to invest in active recovery.
One of our main results from the ReViFES project is that we now have field data evidence that these reefs are really important for the overall health of the North Sea. And then by restoring and protecting this habitat, we can really help the overall health of the North Sea ecosystems, because we really notice the difference between areas where these reefs are present that are very productive and thriving compared to areas where these reefs are not present. And I think this is very important knowledge that can help us to design and target new areas in the future that can become marine protected areas, for example, but can also help with the new restoration projects.
Yeah, what's nice to show is that soon all this information will be available in a nice bundled PDF. In this PDF, all the scientific finds are shown in a really easy, readable format. And then there is a QR code where you can click on the original paper. So if you are interested in more information, you can also read it there. And this is available this year. So I would advise all the people working in this field to download it when it is available.